Who do you think the final boss of One Piece will be? We already know that near the end of One Piece, there's going to be a massive war, so huge it'll make the Marineford War look small in comparison. And I think the biggest clue lies in the move Imu used, Domi Reversi. During the final battle in Wano, the state of the war was represented using Go pieces. But for this all-out global war, I think the game of Reversi, also known as Othello, is being used as the metaphor. Why? Because here's how Reversi starts. 2 white discs and 2 black discs in the center of the board. The game is all about turning more pieces to your color. So, who do those first 4 discs represent? In my view, it's these 4 key players: Luffy, Blackbeard, Imu, and Kobe. The layout shown in Chapter 1121 perfectly matches the opening setup of a Reversi board. And if you look at the kanji used in Domi Reversi, it literally means black turn and domination. The opposite would be white turn and liberation, which clearly brings to mind Nika. That's why I believe this massive battle will be between the forces of white and liberation, represented by Luffy and Kobe, and the forces of black and domination, represented by Imu and Blackbeard. So, who's the final boss? It could be either Imu or Blackbeard, but I believe it's Blackbeard. My theory is that Blackbeard will steal Imu's powers and become the most powerful enemy the world has ever seen, and that's the core theme of today's video. So in this video, we're going to dive deep into Blackbeard's past and future. But first, do you remember this video? I posted it around March 2024, where I proposed a theory that Blackbeard and Rocks might be connected to Davy Jones. Back then, this channel was still pretty small, so it didn't really catch much attention. But now, the current One Piece trends are finally starting to line up with that theory. Actually, other theories on this channel, like the ones about Gunko and Imu, have also been showing up in the main story lately. Of course, the goal isn't to predict the story, but since the owner of this channel is a native Japanese speaker and sometimes works in the manga industry, they're probably able to pick up on the mindset of the mangaka through all the past info, and that unique perspective might be why things turn out this way. I haven't really said this before, but the truth is, I set a line every year for whether I'll keep this channel going or not. And honestly, it's only thanks to your support that I've barely been able to continue. Whether I continue making videos should really depend on how you guys feel about it. If there's no more demand, I should probably stop. So I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know what you think about this channel and show your support. I also do this kind of interaction on my Patreon. Over there, I dive into discussions based on your questions and share weekly translations of the latest One Piece chapters from a native Japanese perspective. Since I limit the number of people who can join each month, feel free to check out my page. Let me just say it straight. I believe Blackbeard is going to be the final boss of One Piece. I've been consistent about this on this channel, and here's why. One Piece is, at its core, a pirate story, so it only makes sense that the final enemy would also be a pirate. In Volume 62 of the SBS, someone asked Oda Sensei why the Blackbeard pirates originally had a beautiful female pirate in the early drafts, but she disappeared later on. Here's what Oda Sensei said. "Why did I remove the beauty? Well, there's a theme that the Blackbeard pirates should be the most pirate-like of all." Apparently, Oda Sensei spent years redesigning the characters in Blackbeard's crew. If they're meant to be the final enemies of the Straw Hats, then it totally makes sense that he took so much time to perfect them. And honestly, out of all the characters in One Piece, Blackbeard is probably the one who most closely fits the image people have of a real pirate. What really matters here is the meaning behind Luffy and Blackbeard's inevitable fight. Right before his death, Whitebeard said something important about it. Someone will come carrying centuries of history on their back and challenge the world. That someone, I believe, is Luffy, the one who inherited the will of D. The D has always been portrayed as the natural enemy of the world government. But more important than that, I think, is the conflict between Ds themselves. Because it's always been those battles that spark the biggest historical events. When Vegapunk delivered his final message to the D clan, he said, "Among you, there is Mo." That little word, Mo, stood out to me. The word Mo in Japanese means also, so the phrase among the Ds naturally comes to mind. But there's another possibility. Morganeer. That term comes from Romance Dawn, the prototype for One Piece. In that story, there are two types of pirates. The Morganeers, who harm others, and the Peacemanes, whose job is to hunt down the Morganeers. So maybe Vegapunk was warning that within the D clan itself, there are descendants of the Morganeers, people who could become an even greater threat than the world government. And when Blackbeard heard Vegapunk start to say those words, he was shown with a full set of teeth, which definitely felt symbolic and deliberate. Right now, Luffy and Blackbeard are rivals as Emperors of the Sea. Before the Great Pirate Era, it was Roger and Rox who clashed. And if we go even further back, to the Void Century, there was Joy Boy. And I'd bet he was a D too. So what if his rival back then was someone named Davy Jones? Maybe those two were the original Ds, both powerful but on opposite sides like Morganeer or Peacemane. And the fact that Davy Jones is sometimes written as D Jones might be a clue. If that's the case, then here's how I see it. The Ds who carry the will of dawn, the ones who bring light to the world, are represented by Joy Boy, and the Ds who carry the will of dusk, those who plunge the world into darkness, are represented by Davy Jones. One of the core themes in One Piece is the will that gets passed down. In other words, they'll end up carrying the weight of the past, whether they realize it or not, as they fight. Joy Boy's will was passed down through Roger and eventually to Luffy. Davy Jones's will was passed down through Rox, and now to Blackbeard. And honestly, the clash between Luffy and Blackbeard, their deep-rooted connection, it's been foreshadowed so many times throughout the story. Luffy and Blackbeard first met at the pub in Mocktown. Luffy hated the cherry pie, but it was Blackbeard's favorite. Meanwhile, Blackbeard hated the drink, but Luffy loved it. It was a perfect little contrast between the two. Oh, and fun fact, Caribou's favorite? Meat pie, right between the two. What really stood out to me, though, is what happened right after they left the pub. Luffy didn't respond to any of Blackbeard's questions. Not a word. Instead, he gave him this look, like he already understood who Blackbeard really was. And it wasn't just that. Even though Luffy doesn't know yet that Blackbeard has a connection to Ace or Shanks, the fact that these two cross his mind in that moment feels really significant. Now, let's talk about the pub owner's tattoo for a second. Take a close look at that symbol. Does it remind you of anything? It's actually nearly identical to an old illustration of Davy Jones from the novel by Tobias Smollett. And in our own world, Davy Jones is believed to originate from West Indian folklore. Specifically, he's thought to be a spirit known as Duffy, a wandering soul in the Caribbean. That brings to mind another figure, a man known for dancing, singing, and expressing pure human joy, Joy Boy. A legendary figure from the West Indies who embodied the desire for freedom and celebration. Both Joy Boy and Davy Jones trace back to the same place, the Caribbean. That shared origin feels too specific to be a coincidence. And now that we look back, the fact that Imu was holding Blackbeard's bounty poster probably means they already knew. He's Rox's son. The reason Luffy and Blackbeard were singled out in that moment likely comes down to this. Luffy is the son of the Revolutionary Army's leader, and Blackbeard is the son of the Rox Pirates' former captain, two men who directly challenged the world government. Rox showed up in the Room of Flowers during the Reverie 56 years ago. And now it's most likely the Revolutionary Army that set Mariejois ablaze. But there's more to it than just bloodlines. Luffy carries the power of Nika, a direct enemy of the world government. And Blackbeard wields the Yami Yami no Mi, a fruit that draws in the power of devils themselves. So it makes sense that Imu would see both of them as serious threats, not just because of who they are, but because of what they can do. And maybe Imu saw something deeper. The shadow of Joy Boy in Luffy, and the shadow of Davy Jones in Blackbeard. That said, even though he has both the power of the Yami Yami and Gura Gura fruits, he doesn't exactly give off that overwhelming aura of strength you get from Kaido or Shanks. In fact, we've seen him look pretty pathetic or even get beaten up multiple times. But you could also say that's part of what makes him similar to Luffy. He keeps getting stronger as the story progresses, and he keeps shocking the world with what he's capable of. That kind of unpredictability, how we can't see his true limits, might make him even more unsettling than the villains who were already at the top from the start. But I believe that in the future, Blackbeard is going to acquire a certain power, one that'll make him overwhelmingly strong and truly worthy of being the final boss standing in Luffy's way. And what I'm thinking here is, he might steal the devil's power that Imu currently possesses. In my last video, I talked about a theory that Imu is actually being possessed by the devil depicted in the Elbaf mural, and that's why they're able to use abilities that are basically overpowered. Remember, Doflamingo once said, "If the Ope Ope fruit had been in my hands that day, I could have used the national treasure of Mariejois and taken control of the entire world." So then, who's really the one ruling the world right now? It's Imu. So if you think about it, this mysterious ability connected to devils, like transforming into a devil or using some abyss-like force to turn people into devils, has to be tied to that national treasure. In other words, that treasure might actually be this grimoire, or even the devil itself that resides within Imu, and I think Blackbeard might be the next one to get his hands on it. So first off, I think Doflamingo isn't the only one who learned about the national treasure of Mariejois. Another person who likely knew is Rox D. Xebec. Sengoku actually said, "Rox got too close to the world's greatest taboo." But what exactly was that taboo? Given how secretive the world government is, there's probably a lot that's been covered up over the years. But the most extreme secret of all would have to be the existence of Imu-chan.
You'll be back! Emus can't help people customize and save hundreds of...
In fact, Chapter 1155 confirmed that Rox actually met Imu at Mariejois. Think about it. In the One Piece world, we hear the term Pirate King all the time. But the term King of the World isn't something people normally use. Why is that? Because the whole world of One Piece is built on the idea that the celestial dragons are gods. So people don't even think about the idea of someone becoming king of the world. It's just not something that crosses their minds. But since Rox knew about Imu, the one who's actually at the top of the world in practice, he was able to grasp the idea of a king of the world. That's probably how he came up with the idea that if he could take Imu down, he could claim that title for himself. Now, you might wonder, if he already made it to the flower room, why didn't he just finish Imu off right then and there? The answer likely lies in the national treasure of Mariejois. the mysterious object said to hold the power to rule the world. According to Doflamingo, though, you can't use this treasure without the Ope Ope fruit. That's why these next panels catch my eye. Look at the way Rox moves here. His gesture is almost identical to Law's shambles pose when he uses the Ope Ope fruit. We've already seen with the Bari Bari fruit that identical poses can be a giveaway for the same ability. There's more. In this scene, the Rox pirates slice through an iceberg. With the Ope Ope fruit, that kind of feat is totally doable, which only adds weight to the idea that Rox was wielding the same power Law has now. The onomatopoeia used when it's cut off is exactly the same. If that's true, all he needed next was the national treasure, and the world would have been his. And it was revealed that Rox met Imu 8 years before he showed up in Elbaf. And in the narration during that scene, it says something like, Rox broke into the Room of Flowers, but he didn't do anything beyond that, and he knew he couldn't. That line suggests he realized in that moment that he still needed the power of the Ope Ope fruit to go any further. And maybe 8 years later, he finally got his hands on it. That's probably why he needed a way to make a lot of money. The Ope Ope no Mi goes for around 5 billion berries. In Romance Dawn, even the Gomu Gomu no Mi was said to be worth 5 billion. So if that same idea carries over into One Piece, it shows that the Ope Ope no Mi is just as dangerous as Nika's power. And to get his hands on a fruit like that, he'd need serious funds. Which is probably why, after the Reverie incident, he started setting everything up to gather money. Just like Rox, I think there was a point when Blackbeard also learned about the national treasure of Mariejois and the true identity of Imu. That moment was probably when Lafitte infiltrated Mariejois 2 years ago. He likely already had the ability to fly at that point, which would have let him slip into Pangaea Castle without anyone noticing. And even if he had been spotted by guards or soldiers, he could have just used hypnosis to get past them. So it's very possible that Lafitte saw the Room of Flowers from inside Mariejois and later reported it all back to Blackbeard. If that's the case, then their plan to take over the world had already started 2 years ago. And remember, Blackbeard's hobby is listed as studying history, so it's safe to assume he's well versed in the history of the Celestial Dragons too. He might have already suspected that the reason there hasn't been a successful revolution in the past 800 years, despite how corrupt and cruel the Celestial Dragons are, is because of some mysterious devil power, or the rule of one specific hidden figure behind the scenes. So the big question is, how exactly is Blackbeard going to get his hands on Imu's devil power? What I want to focus on first is something he's already been doing: hunting devil fruit users. We've heard that the Blackbeard pirates are actively hunting down people with powers, but how does that even work? Basically, when a devil fruit user dies, the devil that was possessing them leaves their body and attaches itself to a new fruit nearby, which becomes the next devil fruit. That's the general idea. But I think Blackbeard is using his dark power to take advantage of the moment between when the devil leaves the body and when it enters a new fruit. His darkness has a unique ability to drag things in, and I think he uses that to directly suck in the devil itself before it can escape. And here's where things get even more interesting. Take a look at Burgess. He doesn't have the Yami Yami powers, and yet he still planned to kill Sabo and steal his ability. The key detail? He was carrying something wrapped in cloth, like a big furoshiki. I think that cloth was hiding something crucial, a fragment of darkness prepared by Blackbeard. There are a bunch of examples in the series where devil fruit powers continue to affect the world even after the user is gone. Big Mom's homies keep functioning all over the place. Kuzan's ice and Sakazuki's magma literally changed the climate of Punk Hazard permanently. So it's not a stretch to think that Blackbeard's darkness could exist in a smaller, contained form, almost like a miniature black hole. I think Blackbeard plans to do the exact same thing to Imu-chan, but in Imu's case, the power they're using clearly goes way beyond what we usually think of as a devil fruit ability. That's why I believe it's not just a fruit power. We're talking about the actual devil itself possessing Imu. And the most important clue here is something Blackbeard himself says. My darkness drags in one more thing, the power of the devil. He doesn't say devil fruit power. He specifically says the power of the devil. That one line changes everything. It suggests that even a power like the one possessing Imu, a literal devil, could be ripped out and taken by Blackbeard using his darkness. I think that's exactly what he's planning to do. And there's one more key factor needed for Blackbeard to obtain Imu's devil power: his special body. Normally, no one can eat more than one devil fruit. Even if you hunt down other users, your body just can't handle it. But Blackbeard is different. He's somehow able to house multiple devil powers inside himself. Marco saw it happen firsthand and said this: if it were a normal person, it'd be impossible. But as you all know, Teach is a little different. His body is structured in a strange way. Maybe that's what made this possible. So what Marco's saying is, Blackbeard's ability to take in more than one devil fruit isn't thanks to the power of the Yami Yami no Mi. It's something about the physical structure of his body, something inhuman. Now, I see two major possibilities here. One is that it's the result of surgery using the Ope fruit. Like I mentioned earlier, if Rox was in fact an Ope user, and if Teach is his son, it's totally possible he used that ability to alter Teach's body, giving him this unnatural structure. In fact, this fruit is literally described as a human modification fruit. Law was able to do things like extract a heart with pinpoint precision. So if Rox had similar mastery, he might have implanted multiple hearts into Teach's body, making it possible for him to carry multiple devil powers at once. The other possibility is the power of Davy Jones. In Volume 38 of the SBS, Oda Sensei actually drew a version of Davy Jones, and if you look closely, he kinda resembles Blackbeard. So, who exactly is Davy Jones? Robin gives this explanation. He's an old pirate who was cursed by the devil and now lives deep beneath the ocean. But did you catch the contradiction? In One Piece, being cursed by a devil means you can't survive in the sea. You lose the ability to swim. That's the price devil fruit users pay. But in Davy Jones's case, he was cursed by the devil and now can only live in the depths of the sea. It's the exact opposite kind of curse. And maybe this inverse devil curse is what allows Blackbeard to survive even after eating multiple devil fruits. That opposite nature could be the key. There's also another line about Davy Jones. Every ship and treasure that sinks to the bottom of the sea ends up locked away in his locker. What if Blackbeard's body itself is like that locker? A place where wandering souls and devil powers with nowhere else to go end up getting stored. Remember when Ace said, "Where does Thatch's soul go after being killed?" That line might not have been random. Maybe he suspected that Blackbeard's body could actually trap other people's souls. Maybe he was afraid that even Thatch's soul would be sealed inside Blackbeard forever. Oh, and by the way, in Japanese, locker and rocker are written the same way. And when it comes to rockers in One Piece, you instantly think of Soul King Brook. In fact, if you look at the cover of chapter 1098, there's the word rock behind Soul King. So you've got this neat contrast. Blackbeard as the one who stores souls in a locker, and Brook, the rock musician who commands souls through music. It's a pretty fascinating parallel. If we think about it simply, this Davy Jones body of Blackbeard's most likely comes from either Rox or his mother. That said, when Rox was first shown in chapter 1154, he was drawn with a full set of teeth. And the 5 elders once said, "There's no historical precedent for anyone eating 2 devil fruits." So there's no indication Rox ever used multiple devil powers himself. But there's one possibility worth considering, a skipped generation trait, what we call atavism. Like how once every few hundred years, a mermaid is born with the powers of Poseidon. Loki's mysterious eyes are probably an example of that too. So it's totally possible that Blackbeard's bizarre body isn't something he inherited directly from his parents, but something passed down through generations. Honestly, it would fit perfectly with one of the major themes of One Piece, the will being passed down across generations. Either way, thanks to this unique body, Blackbeard will eventually be able to absorb Imu's devil power into himself and become the strongest force in the world. He'll stand before Luffy not just as the final boss, but also the king of the world. So finally, let's talk about what Blackbeard might do next. And I think the key hint is the moon. When Teach first made his move as the Blackbeard Pirates, the moon was prominently shown in the background. And I have a feeling that the next time he moves, the moon is going to be in focus again. The moon actually plays a pretty big role in the One Piece story. On a full moon night, the Mink tribe can transform into their Sulong forms. Luffy awakened his Nika's power under a full moon, and then we have the term, the people of the half moon from Harley, which probably refers to the D clan. But here's where it gets interesting. For Blackbeard, I think it's not the full moon that matters, but the crescent moon. Why do I think that? Take a look at this image. He's shown crying under a crescent moon. And think back to another pirate with Kuro in his name, Captain Kuro, aka Klahadore. Just like Blackbeard, he was a meticulous schemer who planned carefully to get what he wanted. Just like how Oda Sensei used Alvida as a hint character for Kaido and Big Mom, I think Klahadore was meant to be a hint character for Blackbeard all along. Do you remember when Kuro decided to launch his attack on Kaya's mansion? That's right, on a crescent moon night. And he even said something really cryptic at the time. It's a crescent moon tonight. Nights like this, get my blood pumping. So it wouldn't be surprising at all if Oda Sensei draws a parallel here and has Blackbeard execute his master plan under a crescent moon as well. Now, think back to the battle in Syrup Village. When Luffy and Usopp found out about Kuro's plan, they set up an ambush at the slope leading into the village to stop them. But the Black Cat pirates fooled them and came in from the other slope. Let's apply that to the current situation. Right now, Mariejois is in flames, most likely because of the Revolutionary Army. If we think about where the Revolutionary Army's base is, Kamabaka Kingdom, it means they'd be attacking from the first half of the Grand Line. That means the world government would naturally beef up defenses on that side. And as a result, the New World side would be left exposed. In other words, thanks to the Revolutionary Army, New Marineford might become the perfect target for Blackbeard. There's actually one more interesting connection between the Blackbeard pirates and the Black Cat pirates. In the Black Cat crew, there was a stand-in captain named Django, a hypnotist. And in the Blackbeard crew, we also have someone who can use hypnosis. Everyone's favorite, Lafitte. Just like Django used hypnosis to make Kaya sign a contract and hand over her inheritance, it's possible Lafitte could use his hypnosis to make someone form a devil contract with Blackbeard. And if we go even further with the parallel, Django eventually ended up joining the Marines. So maybe Lafitte will one day betray Blackbeard and side with the Marines, or even work for them after the final battle is over. Who knows? It could actually happen. Oh, and let's not forget, both of them are Michael Jackson. In chapter 1155, Rox said this: "I'll wipe out the Marines, bring down the Holy Land, and become the king of the world." So based on that, I think Blackbeard's plan also starts with wiping out the Marines. If the Revolutionary Army really has launched an attack on Mariejois, then obviously Sakazuki, as Fleet Admiral, would have to respond. And remember, during the incident where Kuma raided Mariejois, Sakazuki personally showed up alone to handle it. So it wouldn't be surprising at all if he's occupied with that again. If Sakazuki ends up heading to Mariejois as reinforcements, that would naturally leave Marine's headquarters pretty vulnerable. That's exactly the opening Blackbeard's been waiting for. I think the Blackbeard pirates will take that moment to launch a full-scale assault on New Marineford. And the one who will be left in charge of defending it will most likely be Borsalino. Isho can't even set foot in a Navy base until he brings back Luffy and Law's heads, and Aramaki's been acting independently without following proper orders. So when it comes down to it, the only one Sakazuki can really trust to hold down Marine headquarters is Borsalino. That's when it'll happen. Blackbeard versus Borsalino, a battle that breaks out right in New Marineford. You've probably realized it too. This is going to be a battle of light versus darkness. And actually, these two have something in common. They both rely heavily on their devil fruit powers. In Film Z, Zephyr called out Borsalino for depending too much on his abilities. Blackbeard, during his fight with Law, made it clear he believes that devil fruits are worth the risk of their weaknesses. They're just that powerful. Of course, it also showed that both of them are really good at using armament hockey for defense. But at the end of the day, their fighting style mainly revolves around the power of their devil fruits. And in the end, I think Blackbeard's black hole will swallow up the light and bring the battle to a close. Personally, I think Borsalino is going to lose to Blackbeard here. Just like how Rox once killed a Marine's admiral, this time Blackbeard will take down one of the admirals. And one reason I think this is because Borsalino has been in a pretty fragile emotional state ever since Egghead. After all, he ended up killing Vegapunk and it clearly shook him. What really surprised me, though, was how much he seemed to care about Bonnie, especially when it looked like Saturn was about to kill her right then and there. It's clear now that the time Borsalino spent on Egghead with Kuma and Bonnie left a lasting impression on him. Those moments became something genuinely meaningful. Now, we know that Kuma agreed to become a test subject in exchange for the world government curing Bonnie's illness. But the truth is, the disease itself was caused by the drug experiments Saturn ran in the first place. That deal was a lie from the beginning. It was doomed from the start. And when Saturn revealed that truth to Bonnie, Borsalino was right there. He heard it too. Even someone as loyal to the world government as he is, basically a corporate yes man, wouldn't be able to stomach a deal this messed up. Before landing on Egghead, remember what he said to Saturn. "Let me do this by the book." That phrase actually comes up a lot in old-school Japanese Yakuza stories. Suji o tosu. It means doing things properly, following a clear code of logic or principle, and maintaining consistency, something that builds trust in that kind of world. But the celestial dragons don't care about that at all. They see themselves as gods, so they don't think they need to follow any kind of logic or moral code. Even Lucci said something along those lines. Borsalino may look like a cold and heartless man on the surface, but the truth is, he's probably been pushing down his real emotions all this time just to carry out his missions. His sense of justice is labeled as ambiguous justice, neither here nor there. And One Piece magazine had an interesting note about that. Because he stands by ambiguous justice, Borsalino has managed to avoid direct clashes like Kuzan or Isho, keeping just the right distance from Sakazuki. But even so, it's hard to know what he's truly thinking. Sakazuki is all about absolute justice. He sees pirates as pure evil, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to wipe them out. But Borsalino seems different. He understands that not everyone becomes a pirate by choice, like Kuma. He knows there are people who were forced into that life. So instead of trying to erase all pirates, Borsalino's just followed orders, loyal to the world government, nothing more. But now, after the Egghead incident, after killing Vegapunk, after learning the truth about Bonnie and Kuma, I think that certainty he used to have has started to waver. Garp once said, "People who hesitate are weak." And don't forget what Ganfall said too. When a man begins to feel guilt over his actions, that's when he grows weak. Up until now, Borsalino could carry out orders without hesitation because it was all under the banner of justice. But this time, I think guilt finally got to him. And in that state, I don't think he can beat Blackbeard. Which means New Marineford will fall, and it'll be Blackbeard's. And eventually, I think Borsalino will end up captured by Blackbeard. That way, Blackbeard will have two important hostages, both of them monkeys. Having two major bargaining chips like that is going to be huge for him. And this is where things start to get interesting, because I've always felt a bit of inconsistency in something Blackbeard said in the manga. In chapter 1080, Blackbeard says this to Kobe, who he captured as a hostage. "I want to turn this pirate island into its own nation. I'll negotiate in exchange for your life." And now that he's trying to turn the very place his father once ruled into a nation, it makes you wonder, maybe there's still some lingering feeling he has toward his father. But then in chapter 1126, he says something completely different. Poneglyphs aren't some secret knowledge from the underworld anymore. Now it's a full-on war between the four emperors. Even the world government and the navy are in the mix. You can't win this without dealing with them. And the key piece I need for that is Kobe. That contradiction is what's been bothering me. So originally, Blackbeard's goal was to make Hachinosu an officially recognized nation and use Kobe as a bargaining chip for that. But now, 46 chapters later, that's shifted. He's talking about using Kobe as a trump card against the world government and the navy, who are now getting involved in the race for the One Piece. But what if, on top of Garp, he also manages to capture Borsalino? With those two major hostages, Blackbeard would have enough leverage to make two separate demands to the world government. He'd be in a position to negotiate with real weight. I previously predicted that Garp might be used for a public execution, but now I'm thinking Blackbeard might plan a double execution with both Garp and Borsalino. And where would that happen? McDonald's. Whoops, I meant New Marineford. Remember how, 2 years ago, the public execution of Ace, who was captured by Blackbeard, was set to take place at the old Marineford. Now, we could be looking at a similar setup. Blackbeard organizing the public execution of Garp and Borsalino, this time at New Marineford. And honestly, that location makes even more sense for an execution, because it has two tall platforms, perfect for staging it. If Garp ends up in that situation, it gives Luffy, a pirate, and Kobe, a marine, a clear reason to team up. That could lead to the final battle, a God Valley 2.0, where Luffy and Kobe join forces to face off against Blackbeard, who by then may have gained Imu's power. And that's how I see it. Blackbeard becoming the final, ultimate enemy standing in Luffy's way.